He was born into crime, raised among thieves, and sentenced to die behind bars. But inside a prison cell, with nothing but a rowing machine and his pain, he rebuilt himself and became an Ironman. This is not a story about running or swimming. It's about how a broken man discovered strength the world had never seen. If you believe people can change, hit subscribe, and let's keep these stories alive. John McAvoy didn't grow up dreaming of success or freedom. He grew up surrounded by crime. In the rough neighborhoods of South London, the people with power weren't businessmen or athletes. They were criminals. They drove expensive cars, carried stacks of cash, and lived without rules. To a young boy trying to survive, that looked like success. John's stepfather was one of them, a well-known armed robber. He wasn't just feared, he was respected. And to John, that respect looked like love. Watching him, John learned early that the fastest way to power was through fear. At 14, he was already handling money from robberies. When his stepfather handed him £1,000 for keeping quiet, it felt like a reward, like he'd finally proven himself. That moment changed him. It told him that in his world, loyalty and danger paid better than honesty ever could. By the time most kids were choosing colleges, John was choosing getaway cars. He believed this was his destiny, to live fast, take risks, and never be caught. He wasn't evil. He was lost, chasing respect in all the wrong places. But the truth about crime is that it always collects its debt. And John's debt came sooner than he expected. After a failed robbery, he found himself in handcuffs, facing a long prison sentence. Sitting in the back of a police van, reality hit him harder than any fist. For the first time, he realized he wasn't in control. The men he once admired weren't heroes. They were broken people teaching broken lessons. And now, he was one of them. Inside prison, the silence was deafening. No fast cars, no easy money, no respect, just walls, time, and regret. He had chased power his whole life. But in that cell, he had none. That's where the story of the old John McAvoy ended. And the story of the man he would become, the athlete, the mentor, the Ironman, was about to begin. Because sometimes, it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters. Every story of transformation begins with a breaking point. For John McAvoy, that moment came in a police chase at over 100 miles an hour. One wrong move, one loud crash, and everything he thought he controlled was gone. He woke up in handcuffs, surrounded by flashing lights, the sound of sirens fading into silence. The life of fast money and power was over. He was sentenced to life in a high-security prison, a world built to crush the human spirit. Inside, time moves differently. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years. The walls don't just keep you in, they start closing in on your mind. At first, John was angry. Angry at the world, angry at the system, angry at himself. But anger doesn't build anything. It only eats away at what's left. For months, he sat in his cell, thinking about how everything had gone wrong. The people he trusted were gone. The money, the cars, the respect, all gone. The same men who once called him brother didn't even write him a letter. And for the first time in his life, John had to face the truth. He wasn't a victim of bad luck. He was the architect of his own prison. Then one night, while watching the small TV inside his cell, a news report appeared. A close friend, one of his old partners in crime, had been killed in a failed robbery. John stared at the screen, frozen. That could have been him. In fact, that should have been him. That moment shattered the illusion completely. He realized crime wasn't power, it was suicide in slow motion. That night, something changed. He didn't make a plan. He didn't know what to do next. But deep down, he made a promise. If I ever get another chance, I'm not wasting it. The next morning, he started small. Push-ups in his cell. Sit-ups until his arms shook. He didn't know it yet, but this was the first day of his new life. It wasn't about building muscle. It was about building purpose. In a place designed to break men, he was learning how to rebuild one from the inside out. He didn't have freedom, money, or opportunity, but he still had something powerful, time. And for the first time in his life, he was going to use it right. Because sometimes, the fall doesn't destroy you. Sometimes, it's the only thing that forces you to rise. In prison, most men just try to survive the sentence. But John McAvoy was about to rewrite his. He had already made the decision to change, but in a place where every door is locked and every day looks the same, change doesn't come easy. He didn't have freedom. He didn't have opportunities. But he had one thing most people ignore: time. One morning, John noticed something sitting in the corner of the prison gym, a dusty rowing machine. No one ever used it. It wasn't glamorous like weights. It wasn't loud or flashy. But there was something about it that caught his attention. He climbed on, grabbed the handle, and started to row. At first, it hurt. His arms burned. His lungs screamed. But for the first time in years, that pain made sense. He wasn't running from the police. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing himself, the man he could become. Day after day, he came back to that machine. The guards thought he was crazy. The other inmates laughed. But John didn't care. He had found something that prison couldn't take from him: discipline. Rowing became his therapy, his meditation, his war. Every stroke was a conversation with his past. Every drop of sweat a promise to his future. Then, one day, a prison officer named Darren Davis noticed him. Darren wasn't like most officers. He didn't see John as just another inmate. He saw potential, raw, hidden, desperate to be used for something better. He encouraged John to keep going, to set goals, to compete against himself. With Darren's support, John began training seriously. Within months, he broke the prison's indoor rowing record. But he didn't stop there. He kept pushing: 10,000 meters, 50,000 meters, 100,000 meters. The numbers didn't matter. What mattered was who he was becoming in the process. In time, John shattered world records from inside a maximum security prison, 3 world records and 7 British records on that same old rowing machine. From a life of violence and chaos, he had built a new identity, one of focus, endurance, and self-control. Rowing didn't give him freedom, but it gave him something better: purpose. While others in prison counted the days until release, John was counting meters. Every morning, he woke up with intent. Every night, he fell asleep exhausted but proud. He had found peace inside a place built for punishment. And through that journey, something inside him healed. He stopped blaming his past. He stopped living for validation. He started realizing that strength isn't about control, it's about responsibility. When the parole board finally reviewed his case, John wasn't just another inmate asking for mercy. He was a new man, one who had proven, beyond question, that transformation is possible even in the darkest place. In 2012, after nearly 8 years behind bars, John walked out of prison gates for the last time. No fanfare, no celebration, just quiet resolve. He didn't know where his life would go next, but he knew what it wouldn't be: wasted. He had traded his prison sentence for a personal mission: to become stronger, faster, and more disciplined than the man who once believed crime was power. Because somewhere between the pain and the repetition, he had learned the truth. You don't need freedom to start changing your life. You just need commitment. When John McAvoy walked out of prison in 2012, the world felt louder, faster, and colder than ever before. He had no money, no job, no fame, just one unshakable belief: he wasn't going back. Most ex-prisoners step out into freedom only to fall into the same traps that put them there. But John had already found something stronger than temptation: purpose. He wanted to keep pushing his limits. The rowing machine had shown him what he was capable of. Now, he wanted to test that strength in the real world. That's when he discovered triathlon, a brutal combination of swimming, cycling, and running. It wasn't just a sport, it was a war of endurance. And John was ready for war. There was one problem: he didn't even know how to swim. So he started the only way he knew how: by teaching himself. He watched YouTube tutorials, practiced breathing techniques in his bathtub, and slowly learned the rhythm of the water. Every time he sank, he got back up. Every stroke was a reminder: you can learn anything if you refuse to quit. He bought a secondhand bike, one size too big, and began cycling through the cold London streets. He ran along empty roads, often alone, often exhausted, but he was free, and that was enough. 6 weeks later, he entered his first Ironman race. Most athletes train for months or years, but John had never been afraid of pain. He knew the real battle was always mental. The race was brutal: 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of cycling, and a full marathon at the end. But compared to prison, it was paradise. He crossed the finish line in 11 hours and 48 minutes, a time most trained athletes would be proud of. For John, it wasn't about speed. It was about redemption. Every mile told a story of the boy who chased crime, the man who lost everything, and the athlete who refused to stay broken. That day, he didn't just finish a race. He closed a chapter and opened a new one. Soon, word of his story spread. Media outlets wanted interviews. Sports brands took notice. But John wasn't chasing attention anymore. He was chasing meaning. He realized that endurance sports had saved his life, and now they could save others too. He began visiting prisons, schools, and youth centers, sharing his journey. He spoke about discipline, self-respect, and the power of consistency. And every time he saw a young person's eyes light up, he saw himself. Not the criminal, but the kid who just needed one person to believe in him. John had found his new mission: to prove that no matter how dark your past, your future is still unwritten. Because redemption isn't about forgetting who you were. It's about deciding who you'll be next. True freedom isn't walking out of a prison gate. It's walking into a purpose bigger than yourself. For John McAvoy, that purpose came the moment he realized his story wasn't just his own. It was a map for others who'd lost their way. He began visiting the very places he once dreaded: youth centers, prisons, and schools, to speak with young people trapped in the same mindset he'd escaped. He didn't preach. He didn't brag. He told the truth, raw, unfiltered, human. He spoke about how crime looks like power, but it's really a cage. He explained that real strength isn't about fear or status. It's about discipline, responsibility, and self-respect. And when he spoke, they listened. Because he wasn't reading from a script. He was living proof. In time, John launched the Alpine Run Project, a program that takes young people from tough backgrounds to the mountains, to run, to train, to rebuild their confidence. He watched kids who'd never left their neighborhoods climb peaks, finish races, and cry not from pain, but from pride. The same fire that saved his life was now lighting theirs. John's story spread across the world. From Ironman events to Nike campaigns, from podcast studios to global stages. He became known as the man who turned a life sentence into a life mission. But success never distracted him. Every medal, every race, every headline meant one thing: another chance to reach someone still behind bars, either literally or mentally. He often says, the hardest prison to escape is the one inside your own head. And he's right, because freedom isn't about open doors, it's about open minds. John continues to train, to race, and to teach. He still wakes up before sunrise, still pushes himself through the pain, still rows, still runs. Not for trophies, for peace. Looking back, he doesn't deny his past. He honors it, because every wrong turn taught him how to find the right path. Every mistake built the man who stands today, not defined by what he did, but by what he chose to become. And that's the message he leaves behind. You can't rewrite your past, but you can always redesign your future. Because redemption isn't a miracle, it's a decision. A choice you make every single day to be better than you were yesterday. If John's story inspired you, remember, transformation starts with a single choice. Don't just watch stories like this, live yours. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage, redemption, and human strength. Together, let's build a world where no past defines your future.